Joining us now, Representative Tom Price. He's from Georgia. He's a Republican, and he's a doctor. And boy, oh boy, Dr. Price, you did a great job there with Kathleen Sebelius. It made a lot of news, your hearing that you had, and so much so that I'm sure you know the latest now. Yesterday afternoon, federal judge has intervened and ordered Department of Health and Human Services to waive this arbitrary age restriction on this lung donation. Do you think that that's the right route to take?
Well, it's thanks so much, Brian. Larry, good to be with you again. It's sad that that's what the route that had to be taken. That individual citizens have to go to a court of law to express their concerns about the government being involved in their health care treatment. This is just the beginning if we allow the road that we're on to become the policy of this country. This is a very, very difficult situation. The 10, almost 11-year-old young lady with cystic fibrosis who is a candidate for a lung transplant. All of her doctors say that she has a good opportunity and a good possibility of surviving a transplant surgery and going on to thrive. And yet, because of an arbitrary 12-year-old cutoff, she was precluded from getting on the list for adolescent or adult lungs. So I think the judge did the right thing, and we're hopeful and prayerful for Sarah and for her family.
Well, and here's Secretary of Health and Human Services, Diane Sebelius, who is a champion of NARAL. I mean, she'll be the first one to say she doesn't want the government getting in the way of a patient and her doctor when it comes to the abortion issue. But in this case, she was more than fine with the government just making this arbitrary decision. However, I gotta ask you this, though. Assuming that the administration has this position and Sebelius had this position based on principle and they thought they were doing the right thing, you're the legislative branch. You were employing her as the executive branch to do something, and she said no. Now you've got the judicial branch coming in and saying you got to do this. Shouldn't Sebelius, if she's going to stand on principle, shouldn't they defy this order if she's going to, stay consistent? Why should she buckle?
Well, I sure hope that she doesn't. However, Secretary Sebelius and the president clearly believe that the government knows best about your health care. And so if they stick to their principle, that's what they would do. But the principle that we adhere to is that patients and families and doctors ought to be the ones making medical decisions, not government, not Washington, D.C. And that's why it was so absolutely vital for us to stand up and defend Sarah's opportunity and the opportunity of every other child whose doctors believe that they might benefit from that surgery to be able to be on the list to be considered for an adolescent or an adult lung donor.
I certainly get your larger political point, and I agree with you. I think a lot of people are concerned about what happens when, the government starts making health care decisions for you. But these rules have been in place for a long, long time, and one presumes that, even the most, cold-hearted bureaucrat doesn't impose a rule for like this for no reason. What were the reasons for having these rules in place to begin with?
Well, there are not enough transplants for the individuals in our country for the individuals who are candidates for a transplanted organ. So there's a system in place, a national organ transplant system in place that provides for determining the severity of the illness of the potential recipient compared with others, and the sickest rise to the top of that list. When these rules were written in 2004, 2005, there was an assessment by the doctors and by the scientists that individuals under the age of 12, technologically, it was highly unlikely that they would be able to benefit from that surgery. That's changed.
Well,
that's why government control of health care is so ominous, because government is not flexible or nimble. That's why we need to listen to doctors, patients, families, and scientists, and not government when it comes to health care.
Yeah, I get that, and maybe they do need to update them, and in fact, they said they would review them. However, that review could not take place in time to help this young girl. But I guess the question I have is, do we want to be in a situation where these kind of decisions are made on rules that at least have some basis in medical science, or do we want to be making emotional judgments about this? Because, it can become very difficult if the judges are deciding, if we're making decisions like this based on emotion.
No, it all ought to be based on science, and it all ought to be based on facts and study. And that's all that we asked. We didn't ask for Sarah to go to the front of the line. All we said that because the doctors and the clinicians and the folks performing the surgery and the specialists in this area said that Sarah had a very good chance of being able to receive a lung and survive that procedure and then thrive thereafter. And because of that, we felt that she ought to be considered with all the other patients and potential recipients out there. I understand that because of the severity of Sarah's illness, her doctors have said that she has 3 to 5 weeks likely to live without this procedure, that the severity of her illness would move her to the top of the list. So that's all we asked. We didn't ask that Sarah get special treatment. We just asked that she be included with all the other individuals out there who are being considered as recipients for lung transplant.
Representative Tom Price is our guest from Georgia, and you mentioned Obamacare in discussing this issue. It does loom large when you talk about the government involved in healthcare decisions. Your colleague on the other side of the building there, Marco Rubio, he wants to propose a constitutional amendment for the individual mandate, but I understand you have some legislation on Obamacare yourself.
We do. We've got the legislation that we've been working on now for 4+ years. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it was H.R. 3400. Last year, H.R. 3000. This year, I think it's going to be H.R. 2300. It's a comprehensive piece of legislation that puts patients in charge of healthcare, patient-centered healthcare, where patients and families and doctors are making medical decisions, gets folks covered without putting the government in charge, solves the insurance challenges, and saves hundreds of billions of dollars through robust lawsuit abuse reform, and does all of that without putting Washington in charge of your health care. We believe the current law ought to be repealed because it's destructive to quality health care and positive patient-centered health care put in place.
You know, I know that you also serve on the Ways and Means Committee, and they're looking at the IRS. It is just getting to be almost unbelievable, the sort of drip of details that come out of the IRS. Where do you think this thing is headed? And ultimately, you know, do you think there is going to be that link between the actions of the IRS and either the campaign of Barack Obama or the Obama administration directing those actions?
Well, we don't know that, but we're going to get to the bottom of it. What we do know is that more than just 4 individuals in Cincinnati were involved in this. Clearly, with testimony that's already been received and interviews already being provided, this gets to Washington, and it's more pervasive. It's broader than just Cincinnati and Washington. It actually runs all the way across the country in the IRS. This is a culture within the IRS. To use the IRS to target individuals, to target donors, to target groups, to leak information to political adversaries of folks who were the groups that were targeted, and to leak donor information, which is an absolute violation of the trust that we must have in the IRS. So the reason this is different is that it's not Republican versus Democrat. This is government versus people. And that's where you've got to put your foot down and say no more.
Where are we on Lois Lerner?
Lois Lerner, who had taken she proclaimed her innocence and then took the fifth.
Is she going to come back before the committee?
She will be back before committees in Congress. She must cooperate with the Inspector General. All that's being done behind the scenes, obviously. And this is an investigation that is ongoing. And as I say, we will get to the bottom of this. Sarah Hall Ingram is another individual, I believe, that absolutely must testify. This is the person who was in charge of the tax-exempt division, who did such a great job in targeting individuals and donors. She was promoted to be the IRS division head for the implementation of the Affordable Care Act of Obamacare. We've got to get this individual to testify what she knew, who told her to do what she did, or was she the one that came up with this grand scheme?
We've only got 30 seconds, Congressman, but I need you to comment on your colleague, Representative Jim McDermott, the way he handled himself in questioning the Tea Party members. And if you call him my good friend from the state of Washington, I'm going to give up on you.
Look, Jim is a far-left individual. He tried to make victims out of those that were, tried to make the victims the guilty ones for even considering that they ought to have a tax-exempt status. He was way off base. Calling the hearing a circus again is just trying to deviate from the real issue, which is that the IRS has been targeting individual groups, leaking information, targeting donors. It's unconscionable. I believe it's illegal and unconstitutional, and we're going to get to the bottom of it and make certain it stops.
All right. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much. Take care. Go Braves.
Oh, hey, wait a minute. Kick the Nats while we're down, man.
All right.